Sweet friends, how do you do today? And how do you woo today? And how do you woo you today? Welcome to How to Woo, a podcast on love and making love so we can make sure we're making lives we love. I am your host, Luna Robbie. I am a multi-artist and creative guide obsessed with learning about life, especially from other humans direct, because we all have our own unique perspective and wisdom. So here we are again for some deep listening and a little vicrophilia so we can stay excited about life and co-create a world where taking care of each other is the norm. Now we're going to dive into the new set of questions, and I'm going to interview myself. What do you love? What brings you big joy? What makes you go, woo? Think about your own answers for a second, or pause it to think about your own answers, and then I'll share mine. So for me, the moon. I love staring at the moon. I love looking at the moon, not just full moons. I love the moon every day because she reminds me that I am different every day. She reminds me to reflect, quite literally. She reminds me that beauty is ever changing, that I am ever changing, that even if I change all the time, in some ways I am still the same, and within change there is consistency. And there are many other reasons I love the moon, but I don't want this to be like a 5-hour pod. I love croissants. I even love Starbucks and Costco croissants. Like, I love croissants, even mediocre ones. Obviously, the best croissants I've ever had were all in France, but I fucking love croissants. I love it when they're flaky. I love it when they're buttery. I definitely prefer them heated up, especially toasted, or very fresh. Like, oh my God, when was the last time I had a fresh out of the oven croissant? It's been a fucking minute. Oh, and they happen to look like crescent moons. Okay, so extra good. Best bread ever. I also like baguettes. I also like bagels. I also like pretzels, but like, I love croissants. I love learning from other people. I especially love learning directly from other people. I also love learning from other people's books and podcasts and movies. I love learning about what people love. I love learning how other people experience the world. And you can apply all of these things to the sexual context, although my hope is that by breaking these things up, we will get to know people the way that people do on dates, right? Unless you're in the kink community, you don't necessarily normally jump straight to sex stuff, although I know that is changing a lot for people on apps. You know, sometimes you are just looking for a fuck. And if that's the case, I've just heard from so many of you that maybe there are ways for you to feel valued when you're doing that. Like, figure out what it is for you. It's different for everyone, but I love feeling valued. But I love learning how other people experience the world, and I love learning what connection really feels like to other people. I think the biggest awakening over the past 6 years of this podcast and hearing other people's stories when it comes to sex is I experience connection through physical touch, sharing food, and sharing information. Those are things that, like, without fail, always assuming a consensual container here, will make me feel very connected. If I'm experiencing physical touch or if someone's trying to feed me without my consent, I will obviously go into defender destroyer mode, and they will understand that they have attempted to cross a boundary. So I love learning what connection actually feels like to people because I really didn't understand kind of the concept of vibes until the last couple of years. I knew people would be like good vibes only, and I'm a good vibes only person, but I didn't realize that for a lot of people, there is like actual pleasure and connection experiences out of just hanging out. That basically doesn't exist for me. That's why a lot of people who either listen to me on pod or, you know, we have met in a exciting environment where it made sense for us to fuck and have an adventure and whatever. When we first meet a person, it's normal for us to project our ideas about the other person onto them. As we get to know them, we figure out if those ideas line up or they get edited. If we get to know each other and it still lines up and it lines up with my idea of me and your idea of me, we might continue our connection. We might grow it deeper. I also know from the relationship coaching that I do, which is why it's actually not my favorite thing, that there are many people that are very committed to each other in relationships where they are also very committed to actually not knowing each other deeply. Like, they want to keep the status quo. And the status quo is like, we are together and we love each other and we don't actually know the deep, real emotions and parts of each other. And that is okay. For me, that is not okay. So for me, I really love learning about the different experiences and flavors of connection because it helps me grow my compassion, both for myself and for others. And to just remember, I mean, astrology helps me do this too, right? Like, we are all So alike and all so different in the details. I also love helping people get in touch with their creative selves and reflecting how I see them back to themselves. I especially love doing this in photography sessions. The way that I work as a photographer, I recently, have I said this on pod? I can't remember. Sorry. I recently realized that all of my artistry, like all of my creative work, basically comes down to, across various mediums, different methods of trying to line stuff up. And I mean that in the literal sense of like, I find it so satisfying to line stuff up and to make it like in balance. A line, I don't specifically mean a line. I mean, like when I'm painting a circle, I'm like lining up the circle so that the swirls feel balanced to me, and then I see how they dry. And that's so exciting to me. When I am talking to a guest on pod, I am lining up the way my brain thinks about information and questions and conceives of the world with like their answers and I'm trying to line up my perception of the world with whatever their words and patterns in their words are telling me about what they conceive of in the world. So I'm trying to line up our worldviews. I'm trying to find the overlap and line up a connection about relational understandings, about emotions, about sex. In photography, I am trying to line up. Well, first, one of my friends recently commented on some self-portraits I took and some portraits that I took of her. Oftentimes with friends, they will rent the space and I will be the photographer, and the agreement is that I can also take pictures of myself in there for OnlyFans, for whatever. And so recently my friend, we had rented a space that was like very quirkily but cutely decorated, and her feedback afterward, because of how I had lined everything up in the shot, was, "You're like the erotic Wes Anderson of still photography." Because we had just been doing stills that day. But what I'm doing visually with when I have a human subject, so not just lining up doorways and frames and windows and all of that, I line up my emotional feeling of my human subject with how they visually look to me on camera. Let me see if I can explain this a better way. With actors, when headshots were my bread and butter, pre-pandemic, before everything shut down, before I was a sex worker and a sex podcaster, before I could no longer invite people into my home to take pictures of them, I would have clients come over, I would talk to them about their goals, and I would line up the image that I would take of them with their goals, with the way they actually felt. So I would find their version of that goal, and I would use a lot of actor thoughts. So I learned this at an acting studio called Leslie Kahn. My first teacher there, Tyler Powell, is a genius. Like, he is the first person that introduced the concept of vulnerability to me and like being vulnerable. And I remember being like 20 years old and being like, I know what the definition of that word means, but I don't think I actually understand the emotion of that. He was the second person to be like, "Hey, like, do you know anything about autism?" And I was like, no. I mean, well, my brother's in grad school and he made a joke that maybe I'm autistic. So that's when I started taking those online tests early on, 15 years ago now. And they use a system called character thoughts. So you have character thoughts in the scene. Instead of giving someone a line reading, you give kind of the subtext of the line. And so I would basically just write personalized stories for the people based on the genre, based on their outfits, based on their actor goal. And I would make them the hero, I would make them the sidekick, I'd make them whatever, various versions of themselves. And I would sort of like emotionally whiplash people by shooting very, very rapidly, because I started out with 15-minute sessions until I felt like their image that I had captured matched my sense of the person in the world. So I love lining stuff up, especially in photo sessions. I love reflecting how I experience, see, and feel people back to themselves. I super especially love doing this in slutty content shoots. So like, add sex, add video content, remove some clothing. Like, that is my favorite. I also, like I said, do this in interviews. I do this in creative sessions if we're working on someone's writing. I do this randomly with strangers in the world who know absolutely nothing about me, but I might meet them at the airport, planes, trains, at grocery stores. Like, And I love gathering information about people and just seeing how that lines up with my current understanding of the world. I recently was in line at customs and the woman ahead of me was clearly very nervous. And so I just like commented on her bag to try to find a small talk. And then we spent the next 20 minutes looking at her crochet animal. She was a very talented crochet artist and she was an archaeologist. And I like randomly met an So I was like, oh my gosh, I lined up because I looked at her. I was like, she's got to be some kind of academic. And then she like looked at me and I could tell she was really nervous. She was like, I don't travel without my husband. I'm afraid I'm going to miss my flight. So I was like, I like comforting people wherever I am. I got a purpose. Let me go. Next question. How do you love yourself? How do you woo you? Ugh. Well, I woo me by making funny word phrases, first of all. I love to say noodling. I love to say things like, how do you woo you? Woohoo! That's like my new everything. So this question is about self-love. For me, the biggest thing is making sure that I have enough alone time. I love people. I get really excited around them. Most people think I am an extrovert. I identify as an ambivert or centrovert. Like I get really, really amped up around people. However, because I am trying so hard to line people up in my head with my understanding of the world, I need an immense amount of recharge time and I need to do that alone because if someone is in my space, I'm basically paying attention to them the whole time. And it doesn't matter if it's my best friend, my wife, like whoever it is, I'm just like, what are you doing now? Okay, and then what are we going to do next? Okay, and you want me to not pay attention to you? Okay, but I can't actually focus. And I am practicing learning how to set energetic boundaries. And if I'm with someone who is actually co-working, it's better. I can be in a cafe and like kind of block it out. But if I'm with someone else and it's just the two of us, like my focus is pulled. So I need a lot of alone time and I need it to do things like baths. I love taking baths. I need alone time for reading, for lighting incense, for just being. I need it for writing. That's both journaling, regular journaling, and also my erotic nonfiction, journaled or not, and also the fiction stuff that I'm working on, longer term projects. I am working on a sci-fi fantasy novel that has erotic lessons but cannot be censored. And also screenplays, like Mission 69 is still in the future. I also love alone time for self-portraits. Yes, I can capture them if a friend is around. It's not the same. The pictures do not come out as good. I need time. I need space. I need solo retreats. I need more solo travel this year, but I also love traveling with people or traveling to see people. But it gets tricky because I'm meeting so many cool, awesome people all the time and they invite me places and the amount of personal invitations that I get, and I don't know how to explain to people that I really, really, really am truly madly, deeply obsessed with my mission to make the world a sexier, more loving place so that the people who do experience vibes and connection from just hangouts can be a little bit more satisfied in their connections. And I get connection out of projects and information and building stuff and co-creating in a team, And so it is tricky because I'm like, no, I'm still gathering resources to make the world a sexier, more loving place and to achieve all my things. But when am I need to visit people and I need to travel solo. I also love alone time and show myself self-love by painting moons and my naughty planets. Like all of my circles, those are secretly in my mind different types of moons and sex planets. I also like take great pleasure in organizing and keeping my house clean. That one is really due for some maintenance. I love learning. I love spending time in nature and I love talking to plants and animals and landscapes. I don't know if that counts as wooing myself because there technically are other people there. I think animals and landscapes and plants are all people. Well, they're beings. I feel like they can hear me. It totally seems like they can hear me. Literally, I had a full-on conversation with a lizard recently and it nodded and then at exactly the right moment I was like, okay, good talk, go tell your friends, and it went away. So maybe that was a coincidence, but maybe I'm a Doolittle that just can't hear back. I don't know. I also just make an effort to give myself at least a few minutes every day to get really, really quiet. Nothing in my ears, no one on the phone, no music, just quiet. Now, I do live in the middle of the city, so this is easier when I'm out in the middle of the desert or out in the middle of my family farm. Yeah, getting quiet and just letting my brain have that downtime. I believe I also heard studies, probably somewhere on the Huberman Lab, that said that this is very important for our brain to create new ideas and to process is to give ourselves quiet time. So I show myself self-love through that. Woo myself with nice little things and good food. Did I say good food? To my next question, how do I like to receive love and attention from others? How do I like to be wooed? Food is the most effective form of woo for another person. Like, if someone feeds me and can physically touch me in nice ways, like, I am in heaven. In order for someone to touch me in physical nice ways, I need to feel wooed. I need them to be engaged with my work. Like, I am probably the most vulnerable around my work because it is so deeply meaningful to me and because my work is vast. It's across a lot of mediums. When I use the word work in relationship to myself, I often say art/work. It means a lot of different things, but all of my work is so deeply meaningful and important to me. And I do want to invite more lovers into my life who understand that part of me, and who are not asking me to choose between work life and personal life. You know, in my perfect world, that all feeds each other. I also love to be wooed with words of information. Like, learnings are really good, and noodling together, being curious together. My best friends, my wife, they're my number one noodle friends, my growth partners, my learning partners, people who can reflect on their own experiences without ego, who get deeply curious. And I'm not saying without ego, like we all have to be perfect, but just they have healthy ego. You know, they've healed the wounded parts of themselves. So if I ask a question out loud, I don't have to say, I'm just noodling. Like, they know that I'm not setting up a secret judgment trap. Whereas I had to learn the hard way a lot, that a lot of people would explode at me when I would ask my really curious open-ended questions because they thought I was somehow trying to sneaky judge them. If I'm going to judge you, I will do it directly and out loud, and I will probably put a compassionate frame on it. Or if I don't, it's because I am so out of patience that I'm now in like ego destroyer mode. And I am pretty righteous, and I was like talking with my therapist recently about like the difference between righteousness and self-righteousness, and I kind of realized that a lot of the stuff that I've gone ballistic on people lately, because on pod I'm not triggered. My triggers happen when there is deep injustice and like a lack of communication and a lack of logic and just meanness. Like, I will get it's the rudeness. I am triggered by fucking rudeness, and especially nonsensical rudeness. Like, I've given some very intense lectures about why would you treat anyone on this planet with anything but love and respect? Why? Why would you do that? You know, and then I get that condescending tone in my voice that I mostly try to keep away. And I am still in my own growth moment. So having someone who is a number one noodle friend and who grows with me and who wants to grow instead of getting defensive is so hot. I also am wooed by irresistible invitations that include adventures that are aligned with my desires, right? I get a lot of very resistible invitations from people who I don't know. I don't know what their process is. I don't know why they reach out to a complete stranger and feel that entitlement, especially when I think I talk on pod a lot about how entitlement is such a turnoff. I think I've said it very clearly in this iteration of my self-interview episode, so let it be known. Entitlement is gross, and if you don't have enough self-awareness to recognize entitlement versus an invitation that is like mutually joyful, like if you're like, well, no, the benefit for you is that you get to come over and fuck me, and you haven't even shared a name or like any reason why I might do that, and I'm a sex worker. Like, no, thank you. No, that's not how it works. I also can be wooed by a deep, thoughtful level of care and attention that truly shows that the other person really wants to know me, that they perhaps have an awareness that initial connections include a lot of projection. Perhaps they have an awareness that I have spent a lot of time learning how to comfortably hold an open, non-judgmental space for people, and that is because that is what I wish to receive in return. You know, so someone who has the skills and knowledge to do that is super fucking hot to me. Someone who I can feel safe with safe enough to be my true self with, to express a need and to have it met. Like, currently, I have one single consistent lover in my personal life because they have shown me over the course of years now that I can express myself even in messy forms, even though my messy is still very good, and I can express my needs and my fears and my disappointments, and they just hear me and then they do their best to kind of update. And so that's like really fucking hot. I also am wooed by behavior that illustrates secure, healthy ego from a partner who is actively engaged in the ongoing process that is a lifelong journey of healing our core wounds. Because I do not wish to automatically and immediately be cast into the role of nurturing mommy unless they have explicitly negotiated that with me and are paying me to hold that kind of space for them in that way. Next, when do you feel most connected to other humans, and what do you need in order for a connection to become physically intimate? So I need to feel clearly and concretely valued. When all of the aforementioned boxes are checked and we have a very logical reason to get physically intimate, for the short term, I need a clearly defined container of mutual reward and pleasure. I need like a really clear reason to have a yes. I have been wooed by bathtubs with an excellent view. I have been wooed by really fucking cool destinations. Like, I did have a guy that one time, we hadn't seen each other in like 6 months. We were kind of like discovering that we were maybe not a long-term fit for relational compatibility, but we liked each other and we had good sex. And this was pre-podcast, like old me. And he was like, hey, I booked a commercial shoot and it's international travel. And would you want to go to Argentina with me? I've never traveled internationally. And like, I know that you have, and I think we'd have fun. And you could just stay at the hotel with me. And would you want to go? I'll buy your ticket. And I was like, oh, ooh, when would we leave? And he was like, tomorrow? And I was like, let's do it. So that's a good example of an irresistible invitation from someone who I knew was safe enough and we were clear on the container, right? And then he was like, well, how long? Do you want to stay longer? And I was like, yeah. So I stayed for a whole week. He left after a shoot. So that type of stuff. For longer term stuff, I do need a clearly defined ongoing goal that we can collaborate on. And hopefully the point of that goal is mutual satisfaction, delight, and growth. Like, I can only long-term be with people who are interested in growing the connection. I have experienced connections where it's clear to me that it's petered out, but I am still attached. That's a tough spot to be in. I think based on the number of people I've talked to, a lot of us have experienced some version of that. And that's why the ongoing growth part is important to me, right? The communication is important because how can we grow together if we don't have established ways of talking to and knowing each other? So I need clear, consistent communication that demonstrates self-knowledge and a secure attachment style. I need an overall positive outlook on life, and I need healthy processing and sharing of feelings even during the tough times. And I'm not saying like be Pollyanna about it, not at all. I'm just saying there is a way of sharing that I have noticed with the people who are utterly killing it in life that is very different from the people that I've known who are, basically disaster magnets. And so I need someone who has kind of the general trust that if I am experiencing a growth moment, a difficult trial or tribulation in life, like this too shall pass and I will grow from it. That is my personal value. Like, I need an overlap on those shared values the more that we have a long-term connection. I also need a sense of personal agency. Even though we can't control everything, we can control our reactions, our processing. We can choose to remain hopeful and do our best to improve ourselves and our communities, one ripple of love at a time. I need a partner who brings their own curiosity and creativity to the table so that we can grow together over time. I definitely have fallen into the trap of, well, I'll just say narcissists, not to like casually diagnose people, but I really have been in relationships where, oh, lo and behold, a few weeks in, they were like, yeah, actually I have a parent who is like diagnosed with NPD. And then I was like, wait a second. This person never asks me questions about myself. This person never wants me to talk about my work. This person only wants me to give them attention, and I'm just happy because we're having sex. That's not good enough. Not anymore. I learned from that one. I also need someone who is willing to join me in the adventures that can result from being willing to be wildly delightful surprised. That's why my very best friend Gigi, my wife, my lover, we have such a good time together as work friends, as play friends, as adventure buddies, because we have such a shared outlook on life. And then when we go places together, absolute magic happens and we just have so much laughter. I need someone I can laugh with. I need silliness. Someone who is, a fellow Gigalosaurus Rex. So those are the kind of love questions. So diving into the questions on making love, i.e. sex, here are things that I have added since the original launch of this podcast. If you had to rate yourself on a sexual shame-o-meter, with 10 being the most full of shame and 1 or 0 being no shame at all, where do you fall today, and when, if ever, does your shame-o coaster get squiggly? Take us through your personal blah, blah. You guys probably know a lot of this about me if you've listened to past episodes, so I will just say I have an absolute true 0 for work-related stuff. When I am at work, when I'm in work mode, when I am holding space in a work connection, even if it's the podcast, which is kind of like, we could argue about whether that's work or a passion project. It is currently somewhere in between. It's not quite paying for itself yet, but I think we are on the cusp. And again, if any of you want to support the podcast because you get value out of listening, that is always deeply welcome and appreciated. My shame-o-meter spikes real high when I am surprise kink shamed or work shamed, especially by a lover, especially when I'm not expecting it. I think I've recently told the story where my hot summer fling fail, that person fucking lost his shit and really stormed out of my life when I made a joke about being shared with his friends. He was like, what am I supposed to do? Tell my friends that you're really good at giving blowjobs? Because I was like, oh, you haven't told anyone in your life that I exist? And that was what he jumped to. Weird defensive comment, first of all. No, that's not where you needed to start. I don't know. But I decided to attempt humor. And the other time I tried to make a joke with a friend who was a lover who asked me to make mean jokes at them, I made one that I thought was very, very soft, and checking with other people it was. But that person too exploded and escaped from my life in a very, not physically violent, but explosively, verbally, emotionally violent sort of manner. And so I'm like, fuck that. I hate that. And I will still get full of shame. I will think I am bad and wrong, even when my brain knows better. I have learned that I am much more likely to cling to sex-related shame around how much I love sex, and especially around how much I love my sex-related work. Especially when I go back into deep normie family mode or something, and I'm not around any artists or sex workers, and people are like, so what have you been up to lately? I'm like, a lot of photo shoots and interviewing people about their lives. And then if they ask details, I get shy. And then my weird nervous crinkles cause them to get maybe more crinkly than they otherwise would have. And so I am learning to own it better and better. But I still clock that because my cute little pattern brain is tracking everything in real time. It's the blessing and the curse of meditating every day since August 2016, and the blessing and the curse of practicing deep listening and training my little computer brain to basically be able to rewind a conversation and remember the threads and the patterns. That's what makes me a host that's able to ask really specific, personalized questions. And it's also something that has become a problem in my personal life, even though I think it's an asset. Sometimes people really don't like it if I remember exactly what they said, because they feel piercingly seen and they feel like they're going to get caught. And it also makes me impossible to gaslight. And I sadly have come to realize how normal gaslighting is a part of our culture, even if it's unconscious. I don't know if that counts as gaslighting. If someone really believes what they're saying, no, I didn't say that. I'm well, we are in two different realities because my memory says different. And I now have enough recorded evidence to know that I'm pretty good at remembering stuff unless I'm triggered, in which case I'll admit it. My shame will also spike when I am talking to an unknown entity. If I'm talking to a new person, especially oddly enough, in a relational area. If I'm flirting with someone, instead of being ooh, a new connection out in the middle of nowhere, how hot, I'm oh, are they going to take from me? What do they have anything to offer? Are they going to explode in shame at me once they find out that my work is all sex related? Because that did happen a lot early on, when just with the podcast, like before I even had any actual sex work under my belt or anything that I understood was sex work, I I exploded so many people. They're like, you're gonna use me for stories, and I'm like, no, I would have a clear consent conversation, and also I never share things with names. I share pretty vaguely. I no longer share stories that are happening within recent months. Like I wait six to 12 months to share anything. Like at least, like depending on what we would negotiate, what you want. There are some people that are like, oh yeah, talk about me, and I'm still cautious around those ones too, because that's just a different situation. So yeah, I am like primed to be very scared of those unconscious blech reactions. That's still what I am working on in my own personal growth and development. Even after all of these years, expressing my needs and desires in my personal life still feels hard and scary quite regularly until that trust is built and established. And so even though I do it literally all the time for work, especially in containers where I am excellent at rapidly creating a sense of trust and safety, I have met so few people in my life who create that for me that I'm pretty wary until I get to know them. So I'm practicing slowly getting to know people in my personal life and not fucking them right away, which is very difficult for my body and mind that are like, well, we have to know. Why would we wait? What are you waiting for? And I've had just enough experience to realize that jumping headfirst into things is only good in the right context, where there is mutual value clearly being established in both sides, So on to health and safety practices. I kind of covered a lot of this in my little recap. I have a lot of practices that are sex work inspired. I went over the testing check-ins. I always initiate a testing check-in. When were you last tested? Have you had any partners since then at all? Have you had any partners where you exchanged fluid, even if it was oral, even if it was kissing? Like I've learned that I really have to say those specifics. I ask about their partner landscape. Who are you regularly seeing? Who might you see again? What are your agreements with them? What kind of health and safety conversations do you have with them? For me, barriers are the norm in fucking. Fluid bonding, which means unprotected fluid exchange of any kind, is something that I will only do if trust and ongoing communication are super established for safer sex practices. And that is, for me, and hopefully for everyone, an ongoing conversation. So I have learned the hard way personally to check in every time I see a lover, even if it's someone who I've been seeing regularly, even if there hasn't been a lot of time in between. I do have a partner now who I forego the conversation with because we've built up trust and safety, and I have a very clear idea of the interpersonal landscape, and I've made my needs really clear, and I trust that person. I am also a huge fan, learned this through brothel research, and if you have listened to my interviews with any of the ladies of Sherry's Ranch, you know what I'm about to say. The dick check and or pussy check. This is something that I wish would just be regular in all of our sex lives. The first time we're fucking someone, maybe every time we're fucking someone. Like, genital gazing, in my opinion, is underrated. I know there's some people who love to pussy gaze. Have I heard anyone talk about cock gazing? I've interviewed a lot of people who like cocks. Okay, here's a question for the group. Any cock gazers out there? Like anyone who really likes to deeply look. I love looking. I love that I have to be at a certain level of comfort with the person, both directions, to invite that level of looking. And I'm like, damn, if we just all helped each other out, like, because sometimes it's hard to look at your own genitals. I've definitely had girlfriends where I'm like, I feel an itchy spot. Is there anything there? And my doctor friend will be like, I see nothing, and I'm like, okay, and having just someone check in and check out for us. And like, obviously that is all in combination with testing practices, but just to see what's up to date, to see if there's any discharge we don't know about. Oh, I was recently talking to someone. Who was I talking to? Oh, yes. My friend Ophelia Kahn, who does porn, she is hopefully a future guest on this pod. She was like, honestly, if someone is with a pussy owner and they're too shy to tell her that there's a little bit of funk going on, if they have a cock, fuck her with the cock and then have her go down on you and let her taste it. Let her know, because I can taste if myself is off. If for me personally, if I see discharge and I can never really keep track of my cycle or whatever. I mean, I have an app, but I'm like, is that discharge normal? If I see discharge, I will taste it to clock if it's like sour or bitter so that I can know if I'm experiencing something that's off. If it tastes normal, that's fine. So that's my personal methods. Obviously, regular testing is great. I know some people are like, yes, I get tested regularly once a year, and then they see way more partners in between. I will just say I get tested with the right amount of time. For HIV, it's 30 days. For everything else, you want to wait at least the 7 days to just see if anything has happened between unprotected sex with partners. If it's been a minute for me, I will, which like now I test super regularly. So it's like rarely will I go that long. I just have a regular testing practice, and I love fucking other sex workers because they have a regular testing practice. And I wish that were the case for all of us. And I know accessibility is an issue. FreeSTDcheck.org is a great resource. Check it out. But yeah, visual genital inspections, and then I mentioned this a little bit in the initial part, inviting partners into what they are allowed to do, like how I want them to touch me versus what they can't do. And this is particularly important with vanilla partners because the kinky people that I've been with, I've only had 2 major miscommunications that resulted, like one of them was sort of like, can I put my cock in you now? And I was like, no, we already talked about this. Also, I have a diva cup in. Also, don't ask me that when I am fully tied up in rope for the first time. Don't do it. And I was able to say that directly to that person's face. I knew that they were a safe enough person to kind of spit that out and be like, what the fuck, dude? Don't do that. Never negotiate up during a scene. Always stick to what you said that you were going to do ahead of time. Now, I have noticed that with many partners who are not kinky, who are not as familiar with setting boundaries and agreements ahead of time, I have experienced more vanilla partners pushing boundaries than kinky partners. So that is when not that it's all my responsibility, but because I do have more knowledge than most of the people that I fuck at this point, I will ahead of time be like, I love to be touched. We try not to leave marks on me today unless I am explicitly negotiating that with someone. If you want to spank me, I can show you how. If I forget to do that and someone goes to spank me and we are together, I will be like, oh, I'll go one of 2 ways, depending on how I'm feeling and their vibe and how hard they spank me and just like the feeling that I got from all of it. If it's like a light little spank and it feels kind of harmless and I know they mean well and maybe they're just trying to please me, I'll go, oh, is spanking something you're interested in? I can give you a little quick spanking tutorial so that you can know how to do it and know what I like. And so I give that little spanking tutorial. And it is funny because there are lots of people who are like, oh, no, that's okay. And I'm like, well, no, you already did it. So just in case you surprise me again, let me teach you how. If I'm not feeling the vibe, I'll be like, hey, for me, physical impact play is not something that I enjoy unless we've talked about it. Like we didn't do a kink negotiation ahead of time. I'm not feeling this. Let's switch to something else. Or I might even just completely end the session or date or whatever it is. I've only had to do that a couple of times, but it was egregious boundary crossings that included other things. So similarly with breath play, I will let them know ahead of time that front of my neck touching is off the table. However, they can grab me like a kitten on the back of my neck and kind of like massage me during sex. I also try to tell them hair pulling is not on the table. They can put their fingers through my hair and kind of squeeze lightly. However, if I am going down on them, that is not the time to initiate that unless we are in a kink or power dynamic and build trust. That's not the time to like shove my head down on your cock. That is the surefirest way for me to stop blowing you. However, if I'm with someone and feeling a good rhythm, there are some days where I might like come up for air and be like, I would love it if you just like held on a little bit, like while I control things. And then when I develop a dynamic with someone or explicitly negotiate that and have a safe word, or have, if my mouth is full of cock or pussy, I'll do a tap out safe word. So I'll do a double tap that lets them know that I need to come up for air if they're holding my head down. Because that is something that I like from the right person, contextually in the right time. And all of this too, for me, applies to any of my sex work scenarios, including online stuff. So I've had a couple people on Sext Panther and OnlyFans go from 0 to 100 being like, degrading, dirty, this, that. Like that doesn't turn me on. I've also had many listeners Instagram message me without, like, you didn't Venmo me, you didn't Cash App me, you're not on OnlyFans sending me appreciation with tips. Also, like, on the online platforms, the ones that are the most vulgar and degrading, never come with tips. Isn't that interesting? Or on Sex Panther where you have to pay, they're the lowest ballers of the low. So I've only had kind of that degrading language come from people like, but I know you like it. And I'm like, not with you. That's the whole point of the podcast, is to encourage people to talk to each of their partners and to establish the games that we are going to play in sex. That's why it's called play. That's why it's called a scene if you're getting kinky. Like, it's not you are degrading me and my humanity as a person. It's we have a little talk ahead of time about our sexy overlap. We find it. You have to earn the right to say degrading things to me. You have to create this. And this is where I'm speaking to the people, specifically the you. A person needs to earn the right to degrade me. A person needs to first create a container of safety in order to engage in play that is a little scary, that is a little edgy. Without that, it is simply abusive. And I'm just not into that, So I invite people into that as part of the safer sex talk. I say no to breath play unless someone is very, very, very experienced and we have established trust. I let people know how I do like to be touched. I encourage them to let me know if they love something. I want to know. I encourage them to let me know if they need something different. I want to know. I encourage them to ask if they would like to receive something that we did not explicitly negotiate. And I also remind them that we're probably just going to stick to what we negotiated today, but feel free to ask. Okay, I have kept in how did you learn about love, sex, connection, and pleasure growing up? I have reformulated that answer a little bit. I didn't really learn about pleasure that much, or rather, I've been dedicating my life to learning about it, first kind of unconsciously and very hyper-consciously for the past 6 to 7 years. And then I followed this up with take us through your personal timeline of meaningful, intimate experiences, starting with when do you first remember the concept of sex entering your awareness? And so this is where I sort of replaced the specifics and the asking about the bases that was one of the iterations of questions somewhere in the middle. Obviously, all of my formative experiences stand as they are, and me of 7 years ago is probably more accurate than me of today, except for with the number of times I got rejected, which I only know because I have written about it and someone was like, tell me the story of who? And so I told them the story of the 3 people, 4 rejections. And so let's see, since that first episode, the sex podcast that changed my life. Oh, wow. If only I had known what this was going to lead to, what a rabbit hole I've gone down. I think when I started out, I had some idea that if I talked to enough people about sex, I would learn enough, with air quotes, to feel confident or know what I didn't know. I'm not really sure what the end point was starting out for me, but I know that several times over the past 3 years, especially as the chokehold of censorship that we did not negotiate, the world, tech companies, has gotten tighter and tighter and tighter, I've come pretty close to quitting the podcast. And what has become really clear for me is that I really, really treasure a clear, explicit container where the agreement is I will hold a safe, non-judgmental, open-minded space where your yum will not be yucked so long as it is legal and consensual, And even that can turn into a gray area sometimes. And what I've learned is that humans are so squiggly and wiggly and confused in so many ways, and we're all just doing our best. I also have learned that people make a lot of assumptions about people who have sex podcasts. I've learned that hosting a sex podcast has caused my personal life lovers to treat me as a teacher when that is not typically what I want in my personal connections. And I have learned that even having... Look, there was a point where sex stories had a fuck ton of downloads, and now we have a quarter, a fifth of what it once was, and I don't know if that's because of the troll attack on Spotify. I don't know if it's because the word sex is in the title. I do know that we are doing a rebranding with a safer for work title experiment that you will be aware of if you're aware of it, and if not, then you'll still be here on this feed with us. But I am really, really curious to see what unfolds going forward. I am so curious to come forward as my full self. The podcast has also led to an evolution of erotic artistry, which led to me embracing my calling to be a true artist, or hetera, as Robert Heinlein calls them, or courtesan, or sex worker. Like, in all of these different ways, I am applying my sex nerd wisdom, my human robot patterns, like the pattern collection of emotions and communication, to all of my physical touch wisdom. And so going down that rabbit hole is a whole other podcast in itself. Like the last 6 years, I'll eventually write about it and share in great detail. But I think that just being totally blindsided by the like relational ripples in my own personal life and having funny experiences come out of that have really also allowed me to fully let go of the unconscious clinging that I still was doing to the social norms of like regular family life. Because I like, yes, I have my wife, but like, I don't want a like actual marriage at this point in time. Someone would really have to like, it would have to be a really irresistible invitation. And right now my brain is so like incapable of imagining that it's like probably not in the near future, However, I am open to a muse that is my ride or die partner, my lover, someone who is obsessed with my work, who is obsessed with co-creating my vision, like a very big vision to create spaces that make the world a sexier, more living place. Like that is still open to that. However, I've learned that most people who want to be wives or husbands that I personally have encountered, which is to say most people who are like looking for a long-term relationship on a dating app, they are looking for a more normal life than I am. But those are probably my own limiting beliefs. And I also definitely have not done enough dedicated kink dating, which I think is on my horizon this coming year. So that's just like my little add-on there. What is sexy to me? Oh, man. Talking about it, doing it, touching, listening. Like, I mean, honestly, everything that's not hate and wars. Like, most things to me are very sexy. I am aroused most places I go unless I am super tired or stressed. I think the world is so beautiful, even with all of its problems. Like, especially with all of its problems, I'm pretty fucking grateful to be alive on this planet every day, and I'm lucky to live a life where my basic needs are met. And also, I have worked really, really hard to create this level of stability and baselines of health for myself. So yeah, what is sexy to me? I ask this question and I love hearing other people's answers. And then I am like such a bad own interviewee because I'm like, oh, I couldn't possibly answer this question. There's too many answers, which is also true. It's all true. And also, there's no such thing as true. What is reality? It's a construct of our projections, right? And our experiences. What are my favorite things about sex? Solo play, partner play. Like, how do I like to be wooed solo and erotically? I mean, again, these are all huge, huge, huge topics. Turn on sensations, fetishes, kinks, toys. I am working on getting that big bucket list together. And I think as I continue to share more of it, like I did a little experiment a couple weeks ago, I've been working with the AI to get it even better. And I think we have a better version, although I need to like dedicate a couple of days to sitting down with it. So I think I will be sharing more of those like curiosity and turn-ons. I will say I am increasingly turned on by feet both direction. I don't know if I qualify for fetish because I don't need it to get off on, but definitely have a foot kink, definitely have a money kink. Like I definitely love feeling concretely valued. I think that is especially the case after having so many online strangers who don't even introduce themselves, making these ridiculous assumptions that I am just like, that I was just sitting around like waiting for them to message me. Oh, I'm so desperate. And I don't, no, we have high standards. And I think also, the awesome thing about people who are looking for long-term relationships and are on the wife or husband track is they understand that relationships of any size are an investment. I think in the casual dating world where I've dabbled, or just people who hit on me randomly out in the world, seems like a lot of just taker energy. So I am committed to only engaging with other givers because I'm a big giver. And what's not sexy, here's another turnoff. Another turnoff is I have to be stingy. Like stinginess of any kind, but like when I have to put effort in my life to tamp down on my natural generosity, that is quite frankly disgusting to me, And so I want to make sure that I am filtering to put myself in situations where there is mutual generosity, 100% and 100%. I still will engage in certain relationships that are of the matching variety. I'm trying to remember the name of the book I got this from. The word panda is coming to my mind. It was written by a guy. I think it's related to a guy in Silicon Valley who some people call a panda. I don't know if he wrote it or talked about it in this book, but this book is the idea of givers. The framework is givers, takers, and matchers. There are people who take, there are people who just like match and give only as much as they think they're getting in return. And the lesson of this book is like givers can only be with other givers. For me, it's a huge turnoff to have to put time and energy in mitigating my own generosity. I will give people some generosity at first, and then when I see that is unappreciated or taken advantage of, then I'm done. Then I move on. I do the exploration. I like to be generous and I like to receive generosity, and I don't want to have to like do an itemized list to make sure I'm getting enough. I just want to feel like the people who want something from me also want to give, because if not, to me, it's indicative of probably deeper unconscious trauma that they haven't worked through, which means inevitably I'm setting myself up for some sort of like yucky ego explosion, which I'm just not into. That's just not my thing. It's not my kink. So I will be getting into the specifics of solo play, partnered play, turn-ons. All of that is in everything that I am planning going forward, which brings me to my next question, my hopes, goals, bucket list, dreams for the future, etc. I love thinking about the future. I love getting specific, even if I don't know. And I maintain that I do not want to cross stuff off bucket lists just to cross it off. I want to find the right environment, the right moment, the right, partners that are excited to do a thing with that spirit of mutual generosity for all parties involved. I want it to feel delicious. So that erotic bucket list is a huge work in progress. Once I figure out my organizational nightmare, I'm going to be going forth with it. I still do want to have the double penetration with 2 live cocks. I have engaged in more double penetrations with a femme and a mask partner. I still want to have the gangbang. I talked about that. I am hopefully going to have that stuff on camera at some point. I am very excited about the next iteration of this podcast that I will make the next batch of explorations into, hopefully sometime this coming year. Right now, the working title in my mind is Explicit Negotiation. Part 1 is a normal podcast episode, what we love, how we love, making lives we love. I think we are going to end up splitting these into 2 episodes most of the time. This one is case in point. Part 2, we do a special episode where my guest shares the sexy things that they would like to do with me, and I share what I would like to do with them. We find our overlap. They hopefully will be able to like look at my very long erotic bucket list and like pick out some things or say like, oh, would we want to do this? Would we want, so we describe the scene, we record it, then we do it and record that with security style cameras, hopefully some extra microphones so that we can have both audio and video versions of that. And the goal is to completely forget that we are on camera, a la Cindy Gallop of Make Love, Not Porn. And again, that word porn is a very loaded word. We use it to basically mean most on-camera erotic stuff. Like I would kind of point out that maybe a lot of people think Make Love Not Porn is porn. So I'm calling it edge-erotic content, like edge-erotic stuff. I don't know, we're figuring out edge-erotic cinema. I don't know. So step 1 is security cam style, very voyeuristic. It may not be the hottest angles, but it will be like quite literally, hopefully with the right amount of testing, like raw fucking. Maybe not unless someone has a vasectomy. If they're a penis owner, I like condoms. I guess I could get an IUD, but I am not on birth control. I kind of like my body all natural, personally. It's working for me. So then after we do it and record it, we do a post-coital interview. Once we've come down, like I still want to have the cuddle time. I still need, like I will need to regain my senses unless unless they're ready to go for it. I'm open to experimentation. But my dream is to recap it, share our favorite moments, and especially the feelings that we experienced, like the like standout moments. This is one of my favorite things about sex. Some partners are definitely made uncomfortable by it, so I ask before I do this. But sometimes, especially when I'm in kind of like the babbly phase, like this is why I journal about it if they don't want to talk about it, but like I love erotically journaling. I love recapping. I mean, this is why I love sharing sex stories so much. This is why I love knowing how people love to love and making love and what makes them feel good. So I would want to know the like heightened feelings and anything that it reminded them of, that it called up, anything we would do differently or do more of or do over again if we were going to do it again. Then depending on time, depending on energy, depending on the setup, maybe we do it again if we have time and or energy. And then, so that is the part 2 that kind of stands alone as its own erotic interview. And then the part 3 would probably require a budget. I don't know how this part works. I don't know if this is crowdfunded. I don't know if anyone would fund this. I don't really want to sell rights to a porno company. Like I really am quite an artistic control freak. Like I'm really learning through some recent conversations that like I have no problem, doing a work for hire, giving up my copyright situation if it's for an independent creator. Like I'm like, yeah, you go use those to get your business, to get you do you. Like I will create stuff that I'm comfortable creating and support other independent artists with. But for companies that are going to make so much millions of dollars off of my work and they're trying to lowball me, fuck that. So I don't know how this part gets funded. I don't need to know that. I just need to be focused on the what. Part 3 is where I get to combine my skills as a filmmaker, sex worker, and educator to work with professional performers and turn the hottest parts of what we did into story-based erotic films that use the actual tools of cinematic on-screen storytelling to heighten and communicate the emotional experiences that were the juiciest parts in our recap. So I would add maybe a little frame. Maybe we would even write this or kind of noodle brainstorm on this in our recap together. Like, okay, if we were going to turn this into a story, like, how did we meet? What's the fantasy? And so there we are creating the backstory that is like including the fantasy. And the part of this that is especially compelling to me is not just creating this with professional performers, not just getting to exercise my skills as a director and finally like be on set again, because I am so good at like holding space and kind of like steering the ship. And like I am a person with vision, with really unique visions that not a lot of people, I get a lot of blank stares that kind of have communicated to me over the years that maybe I'm crazy. That's where my shame will bubble up. I'm like, oh, sorry, yeah, no, it's a weird idea. And finally I'm like, you know what? My weird idea is desperately needed. And I am very confident about that because the state of sex education, even the people who I've spoken to who got comprehensive sex ed, like that word is not comprehensive in the literal meaning. So I want, as I create this erotic story-based education-forward cinema, it would come with behind-the-scenes content where we combine that with bits of the security cam style footage so that audiences can see the inspirations, they can see the process, and they can see the difference between the art of on-camera sex work and performance. And they can also see the participants, 2 or more people, however many we can fit on a big, big bed. Or maybe we combine with a mattress company to make a biggest super bed we've ever had. I don't know. So they can see what it looks like when people are fucking without performance in mind. And they can see what it looks like to figure it out together in real time. They can see what it looks like to pause, to add lube, to play my favorite game, target practice, to respond and communicate to one another in real time. Because I think if I early on had stumbled across porn where they were really communicating with each other and where they felt real permission to just like slow down and make it feel good. And I remember, I think it was Cherie DeVille who told a story about like, and that woman was amazing because we were on camera and she was like, do it like this, do it like that, and like maybe I just need to watch that porn and I didn't stumble across it yet. There is a vast amount out there and I only had small appetites for it because I would really get overwhelmed in production brain because I didn't have enough emotional context to be able to enjoy it because I didn't know enough about the performer's story or the contexts of how it was being shot or all of it. But if I'd been able to like watch some behind the scenes footage, that probably would have turned me on, and then I would have felt more comfortable going through the whole process. And I have talked to also some performer friends who are like, no, we do interviews ahead of time and this and that. But I'm like, I think what I'm learning is my most annoying quality to most people is my desire for way more communication and details than most people ever want. So that's like the next medium big dream. And, in the process, I do hope to cross off a ton of my interesting bucket list explorations, role plays, fetishes, and I really do want to create my own offering of edge-erotic content that is thorough, very thorough, that I personally have not yet seen. And if this content already exists, especially, it doesn't have to exist in like my level of nerdy detail, but if it does anything in this vein, please send me links. I would love to know what you found out there that was helpful. I have explored some like online educational platforms, and I have not yet found one where the tone and the cinematography and the organization of the content has made sense to my brain in a way that was helpful. So if you know of one, I would love to hear about it. I would love to hear what you love. And I also want to create this so that it is accessible, i.e. not behind a paywall. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know if I will get performers to agree to that. Like, I truly don't know. I don't know how the model works, but I know that people need this because right now, over the past 6 years, so many people have told me that they have learned from porn. Older generations, it was magazines, and that came with stories, and there was like emotional context in that. So many people now are just learning from porn. And some people can like read between the lines and figure out how to be like an emotionally connected, sensitive lover. Like I had sex with someone recently, and they were not very experienced in partner count. Like they'd only been with one person once before. And he was a sweet, great lover. Although he did jump into some of the vanilla mistakes of like touching in ways I was like, I didn't do my overview. Okay. Not that it's my fault, but I'm just like, oh, this is a pattern. And so I want to create something that ideally will be the first thing that people stumble upon when they're trying to learn. I don't know. That's like, I used to be like, oh, well, I don't know, my family be uncomfortable. I'm like, I don't care anymore. More than anything, I would like to blend mainstream entertainment with erotic entertainment. I would like people to see sex workers as full human beings, because lo and behold, they are. I would like to create something that I haven't seen my version of yet. And if I discover that it exists, great. I can rest and I can focus on the narrative cinema that was my original goal in life. But like, I'm sort of like taking a big right turn and going down a deep rabbit hole of edge-erotic documentary that I then want to remake into cinematic erotica with behind the scenes that is hopefully all educational and adding context. So I am more determined than ever also in my hopes, goals, and dreams to establish edge-erotic spaces, not just content. I would like to redefine both sex ed and sex work, honestly, on a huge fucking scale, because I think early on I was like, oh, I'm just gonna do my little part, and I even am like one ripple of love at a time, and I do think that's how it happens, but I'm ready for all of us to do ripples at the same time so we make a fucking tidal wave, because there is too much harm and not enough pleasure. I want to have hotel creation. I want a full service creativity resort where you can have sex ed, where you can like learn how to like be empowered in a sexy photo shoot, whether or not you ever want to become a sex worker. But if you do, I want to teach negotiation classes for personal and professional life. I want to create resources in spaces that are like all encompassed. I know so many educators who like are on all these different platforms, like, kind of scrambling and scrabbling to like make a living when they're fucking geniuses. So I want to create like a mecca where they are highly valued, and I'm creating space, and the business itself makes enough money to pay them handsomely, and it's a special type of all-inclusive resort, right? And maybe it is across the street from a creation ranch. Maybe I actually get to have the super brothel of my dreams. It is funny to me that it was early on in my podcast journey that I was like, yes, and someday maybe I'd like to be a madam and take over the brothel. I knew nothing other than stuff I had read in books about brothels, stuff that I had seen in movies. And I've always been interested in and called to that world. And I really, in some ways, have only scratched the surface, even though I've spent the last 3 years truly doing a deep dive on the legal Nevada brothels in the US. That I don't know very much. I know a minuscule amount comparatively about what I'm sure there is to know, but I just know that I want to create safe spaces that are education forward, because people are learning from sex work whether we like it or not, especially the more that actual sex ed in schools is suppressed. People are learning from sex workers. And so I want to support sex workers and educators in ways where they can come together so we can all come together. Like, that is the whole point. So yeah, those are the big Mission 69, my sci-fi sex ed feature film musical, where I hope that I can, create songs that teach us all how to do the things. I have super backburnered that project, but have not forgotten it. If anything, its fantasy world has expanded. That's part of the novel that I'm working on long term, lives in that world with all of the clone sisters who have their different missions to make the world a sexier, more loving place. And I'm sure that I'll discover many more other things I also want to do, but right now those are the main foci. So this podcast is a piece of it. This is a way for me to continue getting to know strangers from all around the world who actually want me to know them, and vice versa. And my goal is really for us to make a life and world we love. And so, switching into the last part of this interview, how do I think we can co-create a more connected, loving, woo-filled world? Well, it is those ripples of love into a tidal wave, which I think concretely looks like education when it comes to emotions, communication, neurobiology, like physiology. So I am a huge fan of Mark Brackett. He has a program in schools, I think it's called Rule, with the colors green, yellow, blue, and red. So it's not, oh, is this emotion good or bad? It's, is this a pleasant emotion or an unpleasant emotion? And then it's the energy. Is it a high energy pleasant or low energy pleasant? So high energy pleasant is like green zone, low energy pleasant is yellow zone, low energy unpleasant is blue zone, and high energy unpleasant is red zone. And so you can kind of figure out how we personify colors. If you watch the movie Inside Out, you can kind of see. So I'm a big fan of Mark Brackett's work. He's at Yale. Huge fan of Lisa Feldman Barrett. Huge fan of Esther Perel. Big fan of Brene Brown. Andrew Huberman is my number one celebrity crush. I identify him as a celebrity crush. And, my one true big, huge love, Emily Nagoski, who is my educator icon. She wrote Come As You Are and Come Together. And then she and her sister, who is a twin, Amelia, wrote Burnout together. And so I am just such a huge fan of the work of all of those people. And, they are doing great work as well. And I think we all should just learn from them and amplify their work. And other people that I'm still learning about, right? Like, there's so many other wonderful people. And lastly, how do I like to spread ripples of love? Well, I do my best to listen deeply to people. I'm doing my best to understand their experiences, not just through my own lens. Like, this is, I think, the next level humaning that I'm baby deer legsing, just starting to do. I think for the first several years, I was like, yes, I understand through my lens. I have a touchstone for that. And that is also why I interrupt people so often and will share my experience. Sometimes I frame a question through my own experience and ask, what is your version? I have found in my personal life or just my everyday life that being like, hey, here's a frame around which I'm thinking about this question based on my own experience, like, what's your version of that? And I've learned that I'm likely to get a much more specific answer. I noodle in part because I have vulnerably opened up first, but also because of the amount of specificity. And I'm also learning that there's a huge value in not giving that frame and just seeing where someone else's brain goes. And I struggle to find the balance of both, because depending on the order that I ask it in, everything influences the answers. And I want all the answers. Not like, oh, because I need to have all the answers. I just am very curious around all the textures. That's why I'm like, not just where are you on the shame-o-meter, but like, what about your shame-o-meter history on that squiggle coaster, I do my best to reflect honestly to those I encounter their wonderfulness, whether it's energetic, the learnings that they've provided me, their talents, the personality quirks that I find adorable, etc. Like, if I think their eyebrow is very kissable, I gotta tell them, There's a certain kind of quiet smile that I just swoon for. Like, I really love closely observing people and telling them why they're wonderful. I think that needs to be normalized, personally. It seems like it's, I think, based on those of you who I've spoken to or who are in happy, love-filled connections, I think you do that with each other a lot. And I wonder if we could broaden that out, I'll do it to strangers. Like, I'll give a stranger a very specific compliment. Oh, what did I shouted some very specific compliment to this chick who was skateboarding past me. I think I said, "Oh my God, your overall vibe is fantastic. Specifically, those earrings matching your shoelaces. And I love that you're wearing a helmet." Like, and that's obviously I don't know her. I didn't get to know a personal quirk, but like, I was so awash in immediate awe that I just had to shout it after. I didn't know if she was wearing headphones. She wasn't. She was just like, "Oh my God, thanks," and flashed me a little peace sign. And I was just like, yay. And I think creating those safe spaces of all sizes, right? They can be tiny, to connect, to talk, to touch. I think that they've done studies that show that people who live longest have like positive little social connections wherever they go. It doesn't mean that we have to do a deep dive episode forever, but like I am working to find ways where I get to connect comfortably and safely and invite people into that. I also try to understand and share my authentic self in the amounts and spaces that it is safe, as much as I can control, so that others feel encouraged to do the same. I also love to do what I can to provide emotional context to physical pleasure. Like, I'm like, that is a version of my lining stuff up, So even in the face of increasing modern censorship, I am very, very adamant that we must do this for and with each other. I am also really into creating pathways for in-person touch, like IRL connection and creative collaboration, especially in this time of increasing AI and screens. I know a lot of people who are very sad, and it seems to correlate with screen addiction. And I just want to give people like irresistible reasons to get out of their phones, because I am really fucking privileged to live a life that I am so engaged with that, like, to be honest, I struggle to keep up with email and OnlyFans messages and Sex Panther messages because I am so often so deeply engaged with the people who are in front of me, or I'm like in a podcast interview, and there's only so much screen time I can take. I'm pretty sensitive. So for me, the mission remains the same. I invite you to join me in co-creating a world where taking care of each other truly is the norm, one ripple of love at a time. And I think that if many of us hop on board, I know that I am like so earnest and so in the details that it really turns some people off. Like, going back to the thing, like, that's the most annoying part about me, is like, I can't understand all the time when people are joking. And when people are joking with meanness, it's really not funny to me. And sometimes that makes me a buzzkill. But I just actually can't stand it when harm is being done unto others. I'm that sensitive. So if you want to join me and support my work by taking part in my virtual or in-person offerings, go ahead and listen to the entire outro for all the ways that you can do just that. And if you want to help me fund the next 6 years of podcasts and this next big step of edgerotic creation spaces and content, hit me up. I look forward to co-creating with you.